Hi everyone, I am Elaine Privado and I will be the one to discuss the next part of the medieval East Asia, which is the Mongols conquest. So this is the part 2 of the lesson entitled the medieval East Asia. So from my part we have the Mongol conquest. So let us now proceed to the Mongols. So around 12,000 the Mongols moved out to Central Asia and Asia to build up the largest empire in the world. So under the leaders such as the Genghis Khan and the Kublai Khan, Mongols warrior conquered an area from China into the Europe. So while the Chinese prospered during the Song Dynasty, a Greek people far to the north were also gaining strength. So the Mongol of the Asian steppe lived their lives and moved their fated themselves and their skill on the horseback. So the discipline, the righteousness, and their courage in the battle. So they also wanted the wealth and the glory that they can conquering empires, mighty empires, and also this desire soon exploited into the violent conflict and transformed Asia and the Europe transformed forever. So the next one is we have the table of the contents. So in the table of contents we have the three parts. So the first one is the nomads of the ancient steppe. The second one is the rise of the Mongols, and the third one is the Mongol Empire. So under the Mongol Empire we have six subtopic under this. The first one is the Kublai Khans become an emperor. The second one is the Mongol rule in China, and the third one is the end of the Mongol rule. So let us now proceed to the first part, which is the nomads of the Asian steppe. So nomads of the Asian steppe. So a vast bulk of dry grassland called the steppe stretches across the landmass of the Eurasia. So the significance of the steppe to neighboring civilization was twofold. So from the next part, we have the geography of the steppe. So there are two main expanses of the European steppe. The western steppe runs from the Central Asia to the Eastern Europe, and it was the original home of some of the ancient invaders you have to read about, including the Hittites. So from the eastern steppe, it is covering from the area of the present plain in Mongolia. So it was the first home of the Huns, the Turks, and the Mongols. So it is very little rainfalls on the steppe, but the dry, windswept plain support short and the hardy grasses. So the next one is nomadic people were pastoralists. That is, they herded domesticated animals. So from the seasonal temperature, changes can be dramatic. Temperature in Mongolia, for example, the range from 57 degree Fahrenheit in winter to 96 degree Fahrenheit in the summer. So rainfall is somewhat more plentiful and the climate milder in the west than the east. So for this reason, movements of people have historically tended to be toward the west and the south. So from the next is we have nomadic people. From the next part, we have nomadic people were pastoralists. That is, they herded domesticated animals. So they were constantly on the move, searching a good pastor that they need to herd. So, but they did not wander. So rather, they followed a familiar seasonal pattern and returned up a regular basis to the some campsite. So, keeping claim to land that was not permanently occupied was difficult, so battles frequently arose among nomadic groups over grassland and the water. So also, Asian nomads particularly lived in the horseback, and as they followed their huge herds over the steppe. So steppe nomads traveled together in kinship around called clans. So steppe nomads and settled society, the differing ways of the life of the nomadic and the settled peoples resulted in the constant interaction between them. So they depended on their animals for foods, clothing, and housing. So their diet consisted of a meat and mark's milk. They were clothing made of skin of the wool and they live in portable felt tents called yurts. So the members of each clan claimed to be descended from a common ancestor. Different clans sometimes came together when they needed in a large force to attack a common enemy or raid their settled neighbors. So they often engage in a peaceful trade. The nobles engage horses, for example, the basic items they lack, such as grain, metal, cloth, and the tea. Nomads were accustomed to scarcity and hardship. They rated themselves under toughness. However, they were sometimes tempted by the rich land and the relative wealth of the townspeople and took what they wanted by force. So as a result, they have settled peoples live in a constant fear of the raids. So the next one, let's proceed to the rise of the Mongols. So the rise of the Mongols for centuries, the Mongol people had roamed in the eastern steppe in loosely organized clans. So it took a military and a political genius to unite Mongols into a force with a single purpose conquest. So the first one in the Mongols were a group from Central Asia and were nomadic herders who roamed the grassland with their horses and sheep. So the Mongols were skillful riders and fierce fighters under the Genghis Khan. The Mongols built the largest empire in the world. So Genghis Khan unites the Mongol around 1200, and the Mongol clan leader named Temujin sought to unify the Mongols under his leadership. So he fought that they defeated his rivals one by one. So in 1206 naman, Temujin accepted the title Genghis Khan or universal ruler. So the Mongols clan. The next one is the Genghis Khan of the Conqueror. So several characteristics lay behind Genghis Khan's stunning success as the conqueror. So the first one is he was a brilliant organizer. The second one is the Genghis was a gifted strategist. So the third one is Genghis Khan used cruelty as a weapon. So with this one is he was a brilliant organizer. So he assembled his Mongol warriors into a mighty fighting force. So following the model of the Chinese military, Genghis grouped his warriors in armies of 10,000. So these turn were organized into 1,000 man brigades, 100 man companies, and 110-man squads. So he put his most battle proven and loyal men in command of these units. So the second was Genghis was a gifted strategist. So he used various tricks to confuse his enemy. So sometimes a small Mongol cavalry units would attack the pretend to gallop away in flight. The land slaughter the surprise enemy forces. So the last one is Genghis Khan used cruelty as a weapon. So he believed that terrifying his enemy into surrender. So if the city refused to open its gates to him, he fight killed the entire population when he finally captured the place. So the terror of the Mongols spread ahead of the armies, so which has led many towns to surrender without a fight. So as one Arab historian wrote, in the countries that have not yet been overrun by them, so everyone spend the night afraid that they may appear there too. So the next slide is all about the Mongol Empire. So from the Mongol Empire, we have the first one is the Kublai Khan becomes emperor. So the Chinese held off Kublai's attacks for several years. His army finally overwhelmed them in 1279. As China's new emperor, Kublai Khan founded a new dynasty called the Yuan dynasty. So it lasted less than a century until 1368 when it was overturned. So Kublai abandoned the Mongolian steppes from China. He did not he did not share his ancestors' dislike of this settled life. So from the Mongols Empire, so Genghis Khan died in 1227, not from violence, but from illness. So his successor continued to expand his empire in less than 50 years. The Mongols, the Mongols conquered territory from China and the Poland. So in so doing this, so they created the largest unified and the land empire in history. So and also Kublai Khan and the grandson of the Genghis Khan assumed that the title Great Khan in 1260 and territory of the Great Khan ruled in the Mongol Empire. So in reality, the empire has split into four khanates. So in the attempt to the further expand this empire, so Kublai sent several expeditions into the Southeast Asia, and his armies and navies suffered many humiliating defeats and the huge of expenses to live the equipment. So heavy spending on the fruitless wars, on the public works, and other luxuries of the Yuan court burdened the treasury and created resentment among the overtaxed Chinese. So they presented problems that Kublai's less able successor could not resolve. So the next slide of 81, the Great Khan sent huge fleets against Japan. The second fleet carried 150,000 Mongol, Chinese, and the Korean warriors, the largest seaborne invasion force in the history until the World War II. So the last one is the Mongol rule in China. So the Mongol rule in the Chinese. So the Mongol rulers had little in the common with the Chinese subjects. So because of their differences, the Mongol kept their separate identity. So they kept the Chinese out of the high government offices, although many they retain many Chinese officials. So despite of his differences with the Chinese, Kublai Khan was an able leader. So also the foreign trade increased under the Kublai Khan. There was largely due to the Mongol peace, which made the caravan routes across Central Asia safe and the trade travel. So the last one is the end of the Mongol rule. So during the last years of the Kublai Khan's reign, weaknesses began to appear in the Mongol rule. Yuan dynasty overthrown Kublai Khan died on 1294. So after his death, the Yuan, so the dynasty began to fade. So family members continually agreed over who would rule in the 8 year period from different clans took the throne. So, decline of the Mongols Empire by the time of the collapse of the Yuan dynasty, the entire Mongol Empire had disintegrated. So with the end of the so at the end of the Mongol rule, so after the death of the Kublai Khan, so the Yuan dynasty began to fade. So family members continuously agreed over who would rule in 1 8 year period. So for different clans, they took a throne. So rebellions broke out in many parts of the China in the 13th. So the Chinese had long resented their Mongols ruler, and the Mongol humiliation of the Chinese only increased under Kublai Khan's successor. So the rise of the fall of the Mongol rule affected civilization from the Eastern Europe and China to China. So Kublai Khan had tried to extend his influence to Japan, but he but had failed. So however, several centuries earlier, the Japanese had embraced the influence and an outside culture in China. That would be all, and Mr. Clarence Privado will be the one to discuss the next part of our topic, Medieval East Asia. Thank you.